Monica Swanson, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
It's so fun to have you in on this discussion about graduates. And what I like about you kind of coming into this conversation is that between you and Alex and myself, we all are in a little bit of a different, well, we're all in different places to start. And so that matters because every place has its own special rules right now. But then also we do things a little bit differently. I'm a little bit more rural. Alex is city and you are homeschooling on an island. So, so I like that we're all bringing these different aspects of life to this conversation. So Monica, tell us first a little bit about you, where you live and what you do.
Right. So hi, everyone. I am a homeschool mom to 4 boys, but I guess it's down to 2. I have a almost 21-year-old who would normally be in college in California, but he is home with us now. And the rest of us, we're all here on the North Shore of Oahu. So kind of, we call it country, but I mean, I'm just a few minutes from a grocery store, but yeah, we're out there a little ways. We live up on a big hill and kind of grow tropical fruit. So it's island life. My boys are all surfers, and the second son has graduated a year ago. So he did get to do the graduation thing. Though we homeschool, we kind of are in a group that does a full graduation ceremony. And so this year we don't have any graduates, but then we've got a 16-year-old and a 9-year-old. So I've got the 4 boys spread between 20 and 9. And yeah, we're out here doing our thing. They kind of have their own school between the brothers, but lots of friends that they're missing and activities, though they do get to surf still right now. So that's keeping them sane.
Yeah, you're the big surfer family. That's what I know about your family, Monica.
Yeah, well, except me. I'm usually the one holding down the fort on the beach. So
yeah,
no complaints.
Somebody has to.
Making the sandwiches.
Yeah. Right.
Well, let's jump in. Oh, before we move off of that, and you do have a podcast and you are a writer.
That's right. I'm trying to document it all as we go.
Yeah, I love it. Well, let's jump into this conversation about graduation. For those of us who have seniors, whether that be a senior in high school or a senior in college, we are trying to get creative, and this really is kind of thrown on us last minute. So we probably haven't given this a ton of thought, but we're trying to decide how are we going to celebrate our seniors? How are we going to still make this special for them, even amidst this crazy situation that we're living right now? So first of all, why don't we start with marking actual graduation? Now, whether that be from college or from high school, let's talk first about marking this. Let's say normally they would do a ceremony, whether the college or the high school normally would have a ceremony of some kind. So let's talk about that. Alex, do you want to start? What are some ideas that we could do?
You know, I've seen some parents who are already starting to do something formal and official. I don't know if it's in conjunction with when graduation dates would have happened, but it's starting to happen. It's May and graduations were on the books. So they're starting to do little home ceremonies, whether it's on a dock or in their backyard, but collecting maybe the people they live with and a few other people and doing something special where there's a speech, there's a diploma, there's a cap and gown, and you can take pictures and you can say meaningful things to your child. But I've been thinking about, now I have not had a senior yet because my oldest is finishing her junior year in high school. So I haven't gone through this process. So it's made me think about, what does a high school graduation mark for a student? And it really is this transition for many kids of moving from childhood, everything they've known, into a more independent phase, no matter what their next step is. Even if they're going to be living at home the following year, they're probably moving into the workforce or studying at school and commuting. But it's this move from childhood to adulthood. So we have very few markers culturally as kids grow up. This is one of the very few that we all celebrate universally, if not the big one for
Yeah.
kids who graduate from high school. So I've just been thinking about the importance of it and how recreating this ceremony can at least create a marker for a student and their family as he or she transitions from this life that they've lived up to this point to the next phase. It's really the first big transition.
It's a great point. Monica, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I just have to say my heart does go out to any of you. If you're listening and you're facing this, we didn't have much time to prepare for it. So not to get too stuck on, feeling sad, but it is worth worth a little grieving, I think. And it's a tough one. I know as a homeschool family, like I said, we did have a ceremony last year for our son, but it certainly didn't look like a typical graduation. So in some ways, I feel like we had to recreate something just because we're homeschoolers. And at their homeschool graduation, they do wear the cap and gown, but what the kids do is they each present, I jokingly call it a homeschool talent show, because each of the kids has a 3-minute span to do anything they want in front of everybody who's gathered. And so some kids give a speech, some kids do a dance or a song. So I guess I was thinking, maybe there's some way to celebrate the skills or talents or gifts that child has developed in their growing up years. So even if the family can put together a video, maybe of some highlights of the things that child has done, who they are today, what it took to get there, share it on social media. I don't know, share it with their family members in emails, just a way to really highlight who, like you said, who they are as they launch from childhood into a more mature, independent state. So I think just really giving that child the spotlight in any way you can is probably what's going to matter the most, making them feel special. And depending on where you are, sometimes that means a small gathering. Here in Hawaii, we're not even supposed to gather yet in small gatherings, and graduations are pretty early in Hawaii compared to most of the world. And so things are starting to happen now, and people are really forced to get creative. But I think putting the spotlight on the kids any way you can is probably the most important thing.
I love that, Monica, because in a normal graduation where there's 300 to 500 kids, obviously each child, there's no way every student could have 3 minutes of the floor. But because this is a different scenario, you do have that time to do that. And if you are in an area that gathers, that's, you can maybe do 20 or under or 50 or under, you could even do that with a few different families. And that would make it feel a little more, I don't know, a little more formal, a little more like it was a real ceremony. But what I really think it's that whole mind shift of what is this opening up? What opportunity is this giving that we wouldn't have had before? So trying to pivot again, take that positive spin on it. What are we going to be allowed to do in this graduation ceremony that there's no way we could have done in the traditional graduation ceremony? And I think that is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
I was thinking that you could have a special dinner for the graduate, and they're the guest of honor. So you make it really fancy. They have the head of the table, and, make them walk down the driveway, have music or live music if someone plays guitar or sings or whatever. And then you could have them come in to everyone clapping, and you could have balloons, and, they sit down and they're kind of in the hot seat, which again, personality dependent, you have to decide what your child is going to like or not like. But my first graduate would have loved the hot seat. This graduate that we have for this year is not as much the spotlighter. He doesn't love to just have all the attention on him. And so we'll keep that take that into consideration. But, really have them being the guest of honor and making their favorite foods and coming up with, questions for them that they would like to talk about, or doing something meaningful, like maybe sharing some things about that child at the table, kind of along the lines of affirmation or memories. Like, this is what I have seen you do over your school years, and maybe pick a example from elementary, an example from middle school, an example from high school, and just say, this is what I see in you, and really make it a time of kind of speaking life and affirmation into that graduate.
I love that. I know my boys have kind of surprised me because we try to do the affirmations at birthdays. And once they've gotten older and we ask about some of their favorite memories growing up, that's one of the things they always bring up. So I think things like that might be more meaningful to our kids than we would think. So I love that. Those are great ideas.
Yeah. And it's something you could do during the ceremony too. If you're trying to personalize the ceremony, is have those words of affirmation. Like you said, Krista, the opportunity is there to really make the whole thing about this one student or a few students if you're doing it together. So whether it's at the dinner after or during the ceremony itself, it allows for that space to talk about God has made you in these beautiful ways that we love so much.
Yes. I'll add one thing a friend of mine told me her hometown is doing. And this is, somewhat about the ceremony, but leads, I suppose, into the celebration. But they are talking about doing an Adopt a Senior, where different families in their community, whether or not they have a senior, can pick a name off of a list and spend the week leading up to graduation, almost Secret Santa style, dropping off gifts and treats just in their front yard, at their doorstep, banners or cards, just ways to make that graduate feel like leading up to it. There's just people out there cheering for them, rooting for them, kind of sponsoring that child. I just think that could be a really neat way. If all the seniors were covered, it would be a really neat way to make those whose families might not be thinking right now, maybe under a lot of stress and can't be creative and can't be really strategizing ways to honor them. If the community can come together, I think that's a really neat idea.
I think that is such a great idea. And you could do that as a church. I mean, you could pick, the seniors in your church that do it, or in your Young Life group or whatever, and just rally the parents. It just takes someone to organize, right?
Yep.
It's like, it just takes one person to organize it. But once it's organized and everybody does their part and you feel like you're giving, and what's neat about that is, I think we're all looking for ways to bless others during this time. And to not just be in our homes all, self-focused, but we're looking for ways that we can safely serve other people. And what a great, great way to safely serve another person and another family, because you're really serving the whole family by doing that.
Yeah.
So I love that. That's really beautiful. And then I also was thinking, how to get grandparents involved, because you could even social distance in a graduation ceremony and give the grandparents some jobs that they're in charge of that are still within the social distancing protocol, using that. And I think that's a great way to get other people in your family involved and as a part of it. Because right now that's hard too, is the distance with extended family.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on to what I'm going to call senior fun, the fun part of graduating. And I feel like this is where maybe high school and college diverge a little bit, because there's way more in high school, kind of more formal fun things like the senior all-nighter, senior skip day, senior prank, and not every school has those, obviously. But, how can we recreate some of these traditions that our high school seniors are missing out on? Alex, do you want to talk about that first?
Well, my daughter's high school doesn't have a lot of those traditions. It just isn't part of the school culture. Prom was a big one. And really between prom and graduation, that's where I think our seniors at our high school are feeling like they're missing out. So parents are trying to do things to celebrate prom as well as kind of the graduation ceremony element. Because we live in a place where we're still pretty restricted on having groups of people together, I was trying to think of what are creative ways where somebody can see lots of people within the guidelines that we have here locally. And I wondered if maybe something like a progressive dinner where the student is traveling from home to home and maybe is in driveways of different people. So it's kind of like a traveling party for that
Super
student.
Fun. I love that.
And maybe there's a theme where everybody gives them something that you have predetermined, a card, and I don't know, just come up with something, some flowers to make a bouquet, or I don't know, but at each stop that they're getting something. Or you could do it in reverse, where everybody comes to your house. So one thing that's been big here is the idea of the car parades, like when a kid has had a birthday and people have driven by and honked their horn. So people are starting to do that for graduation too, where you're the home base and then you coordinate for people to either drive by and you can talk from the driveway, or stop and get out but kind of keep distance. But then it keeps it to one person or one group of people at a time for your student, which then would kind of work within the social distancing requirements locally. But it also allows for that one-on-one conversation, which sometimes when you have a big party or a big celebration, not everybody gets to talk to the guest of honor. So it's a way, I think, to incorporate that. And then even if you can't do it that way, to be able to do something virtually, which I know is not as fun. It's just not as fun as having their friends together. But if you can't be together, you can't be together. And so how do we work within the restrictions that we have to still try to make it something special and meaningful? Here, a lot of people are decorating houses, decorating doors. Our high school did signs for every senior that were personalized, which that kind of surprised me because that's a lot of work, but they had one printed for a yard sign for every student with their name on it and the school's logo, class of 2020, and delivered it to every student. But those kinds of things, you know, kind of help create that festive feel while everyone is stuck at home. And another thing is just the possibility of delaying the party, which I know people are doing with weddings, but
funerals.
Yeah, waiting until July and seeing, could we have 40 people in our yard in July? Because we can't right now. And then it becomes a little bit of a send-off for the student too, if they're leaving for school.
Yeah, that's great. Monica, what about you? What are some of your thoughts on the fun part?
Yeah, well, I just loved all of that. I'm thinking, in some ways, I think some of these kids are going to come away with better memories than they would if they had a massive celebration and then a school all-nighter. I know I hated my all-nighter. I was trying to remember, was there anything good about that? But I'm like, you know what a neat, I just think there's going to be a lot of silver linings. And I think some of these kids that feel really like the spotlight's on them, their whole neighborhood sees their yard. Like, come on, that's pretty cool. That's more than a lot of seniors get. So I don't know if I have anything to add to that. One thing I just told my friend whose son is graduating, and I hadn't received an announcement yet. And I said, you know, are you going to do announcements? Because obviously they usually have the date of the celebration and all of that. And she's like, oh, we hadn't thought of that yet. And I said, well, be sure you do, because there's a lot of sympathetic people out there that are probably going to spoil the heck out of all those graduates. So I said, whatever you do, don't forget, because I would love to bless your son with a nice check right now. So don't forget, like, just because there's no ceremony, don't think you shouldn't send out an announcement. So no, I just love all that. And I do think that delaying it could be neat, because I remember when my son graduated, we had a party, but then when he left for college, it was kind of like, well, we'd invite all the same people. So it's kind of awkward, but he didn't really get to say goodbye to a lot of people. So maybe delaying it would be a great way to kind of do both of those things.
We are going to do graduation announcements. We're going to send them out here soon. And I was actually wondering, is there a way for me to make that a part of the fun? Like, could I stick an envelope in there, or even just in, you know, my email address that said, can you email me one word? And then I do like a big collage of all the words that people send, or, you know, just something that actually even the graduation announcement can become a part of the blessing that we try and give our graduate.
I think so. I say go for it. I love that.
Well, so I've been considering what are some fun things that seniors could do. And I was thinking, okay, senior skip day could be a day off from virtual schooling, where you just let them have a totally free day. They don't have to do anything. And maybe they get to go do something a little crazy and fun. Again, crazy and fun is very maybe not as crazy and fun as life normally is, but maybe it's like they actually get to go do takeout somewhere crazy, and then maybe they get to go on a social distancing hike with a couple of friends, or go swimming. Now that the weather's getting nicer, they can go swimming in the river. We have some natural bodies of water, or the lake. So just trying to think through, what could be a fun, even senior skip day, so to speak, in quotations. I was also thinking for senior sunset, because that's a lot of seniors do that, where they watch the sunrise in the fall together, and then they watch the sunset in May, which I think is really beautiful and kind of symbolic. And so I was thinking you could totally do that with social distancing with a few of their friends. You could go somewhere, you could set up a fun picnic, different blankets, and have them watch the sunset together. That would be, I think, really easy to do.
Totally.
And then I was thinking for the senior all-nighter, and I think a lot of people will choose to forego this, but if you are in an area where you can gather a few families, I think that's the only way I would do a senior all-nighter, is if I could actually gather some other families to do it with me, where we could all be in charge of different things. But I was thinking you could totally have a blackjack and Texas Hold'em table. My husband would absolutely run that table. You could have karaoke, so you could borrow. Most people, you usually can find one of those machines somewhere. Somebody has one from Costco. You can rent those sumo suits. Again, I'm thinking boys right now for the sumo suits, but those are a total blast for boys. You could have a little photo area or a photo booth that you set up that has a little, maybe graduation balloons like 2020 spelled out. You could get a giant twister and do that. You could make an obstacle course. You could do a candy buffet, or have like a snack buffet where everybody brings snacks and you put them all out. You could do door prizes where people donate, grandparents and whatnot could even donate some door prizes and gift cards. And you could, do streamers and just make it festive. Again, I think it would be a super fun idea, especially if you could do it with a few families, and then just say, okay, you're in charge of the photo area. You're in charge of the blackjack, Texas Hold'em, table. You're in charge of the obstacle course. And so you're not doing all the work yourself. But again, that's only if your area allows that. But I did want to mention that because some people's areas might allow that. And I think that would be a really fun idea. Another alternative I was thinking of that we did a couple of weeks ago, kind of in the place of prom, was a murder mystery dinner. And we just called it Living Clue, because my kids love the game Clue. And so we just called it Living Clue, and everybody dressed up, and it was so much fun. Like, I can't even tell you how much fun it was. We had such a blast. And a part of it was that everyone really got into it. So if everybody doesn't get into it, then it's not as fun. But if everybody, even my 8th grader, I mean, he actually won Best Actor of the night. And a part of it was, I think, everybody else was really into it. And so that gave him permission to really be into it. And he totally played his part. It was so fun. And for kids,
how did this work? I got it, because now you're getting me thinking. I want to just do this for fun. So people just walk us through it a little bit. Do you mind?
Yeah, I totally will. So you download a script.
Okay.
And you can download one off the internet, but I will give a word of caution. There are many inappropriate scripts out there. I mean, I really had to sift through lots of scripts to find one that was appropriate. But you just go through, there's lots of free ones, and there's some you can pay for. I think some of the paid ones have like clean versions. And so you can just get the clean versions. And then you give everyone a character ahead of time. So you give them, before they show up for the party, you say, okay, you are, like, ours was a 20s theme, and we had a play on like Ginger Robbers, Fred Austere, all these like James Stalwart. So all of these like kind of little twists on, James Stewart, Ginger Rogers, all those names. So like I sent them their character, so they knew what they were coming as. And then you also send them their script, but they don't have to go off the script. It mainly just says things like, okay, you are the town gossip and you want everyone at the party to not trust James Stalwart. And so your whole goal for the first part of the party is to get everyone to question his integrity, and so like, then she knows what to do. So then she goes into the party and like, when he's not looking, she's like bad mouthing him to everyone else, cool.
Yeah.
It's so fun. I mean, we had such a good time. And then at the end of the night, of course, someone dies in the middle of the party. And then it's, the game of trying to figure out who did it. And then you find out at the end, right? Everybody guesses, and then they vote on best actor, best costume, things like that too.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah. So it was really fun, but I think what's great about it is it would be a really fun graduation activity to do. Yeah. And it would be really fun in place of prom, especially for kids who are like, you know what, I really don't want all the attention to be on me. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the reason we did it, is because my son is more in that camp. And so it was just a way to kind of have this fun night without like it all being about him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's something that people can delay and just keep in the back of their heads for July or August if they can't do it right now.
Yeah. Well, any other ideas that we're not thinking of that we've missed about how a family can celebrate a graduate? We haven't really talked about college graduates. So let's go there a little bit. What do you think about that? How does college graduation differ from high school graduation in your minds?
I am just totally going back to my 21-year-old self because I don't have kids that age. So I'm kind of regressing. But when I think of the stage of life I was in when I was graduating from college, I really had worked hard and I was looking forward to some of the new challenges. But I was proud of who I was as a person. I had worked on my character, but I'd also worked on my academics. And that felt different than high school graduation, which felt like I was really separating from my family. That's what we were celebrating, was kind of that transition. And it's almost as if college graduation is celebrating who I have become. And I don't know if that's true. Again, I am absolutely just going back to remembering, and maybe I'm romanticizing it all, but that's kind of what I remember. So thinking about celebrating someone from graduating from college, I would think it might be a little bit more focused in on what they've worked on, whether that's personal work, spiritual work, or academic work, and how they have maybe shown some grit in their life, where the rub has been, where they have overcome, and celebrating that. We should celebrate that if they're graduating from high school and they've overcome things too. I don't want to minimize that, but I just wonder if in general that's a time, college is such a time of figuring out who you are. And so.
And I think my heart just kind of goes out to college graduates in a different way than high school, because I think when you're graduating high school, you kind of know you're always going to come back home unless your family's moving away. But you have that sense that, I'll probably see everyone next summer or Christmas. But for college, it just kind of breaks my heart, because I'm thinking, I know my son, he was a sophomore, but he was away at spring break when everything kind of started to come down. And the day he got back from spring break, he had to pack up his bags and get out of the dorm. And so there was no closure, no goodbyes. And if he was graduating, to just imagine that there's just that sense of, unfinished business, where you don't get to see your friends one more time, because you're probably not all going to come back unless, you have a planned reunion, which I'm hoping that this will cause people to really work on getting to those reunions, because I know I didn't do any college reunions. And so hopefully this will make people come back together in the future. But yeah, it's a little bit of a different situation, and it makes me sad. But I do know that when you're graduating college too, you're probably focused on the career goals and just excited about the future that you need to get out there and start working towards. So, I'm sure in some ways it's easier, in some ways it's harder.
Yeah, for sure. I also think that often people take trips when they've graduated from college. So whether that be with their family, or often it's with their college friends, that has kind of been a tradition. I remember this is where Alex and I cross a lot, but where our husbands after college took a trip together, a big road trip. And that was really a marker and really fun for them. And I think kind of a last hurrah. You've been with these people for 4 years, and this is a little bit of a last hurrah. And so I'm wondering if we could just help our college graduates think outside the box a little bit, that maybe they get something on the books for 2021 with their people, and they all block it out and they know we are going to go this week in 2021 because we can't right now. But just maybe helping them think about how they can still do those things that they were wanting to do to celebrate this milestone, but it just can't be right now.
I love that. I think that's awesome. And I think just also slowing down to take the time to put the spotlight on them, because sometimes they are so ready to go into that next stage, but to slow down and say, look what you've just done. It's a big deal to graduate from college. I love that.
And one of you had an idea that I really liked that you talked about before we were recording, about having professors write letters. Which one of you was that? Was that you, Monica?
I think it was Alex.
Okay. Yeah. Talk about that.
Well, I just thought kind of along the same idea of what's your focus when you're graduating from college. And it is this idea of my accomplishments and what I worked so hard toward the last 4 years. And it takes that principle from high school graduation of affirming the student and the graduate, but having it come from a different voice, somebody in authority, hopefully that's been a positive influence in your life, that can speak that same kind of observation into the student of, this is who I see you to be. Now, it probably depends on where they're in school and what kind of relationships they have with their professors and the size of the school and all of that. But maybe it's not a professor, maybe it's a campus ministry person or somebody from their fraternity or sorority. Just having those other voices that say, this is who I see you to be, as long as they're going to be affirming voices, that it gets, again, to creating that spotlight without the physical connection and the physical presence of a big party or a big gathering or a big ceremony.
And I want to give another shout out to VidHug. You know, we talked about that, Alex and I, on our episode a few weeks ago about celebrating birthdays, but that VidHug would be a great tool to use for graduations. And you could send it to professors or people they've worked for, maybe in the workplace, or church leaders, whatever. And you could actually have people doing a video, and then it puts it all together for you. So another shout out to VidHug as a medium for that too. All right. Well, anything else? How about just a word of encouragement from both of you? Love to hear it for parents of graduates.
Yeah, well, I'll just say, give yourself and your kids a lot of grace right now. I mean, I think we always all need that. One thing that occurred to me as I was pondering all of this was just how we sometimes as parents tend to project our own emotions or memories onto our kids. And the good news is our kids don't have the same memories that we do. And so they might not know what they're missing. And so we should probably be a little bit guarded against making it too dramatic or emotional, because sometimes the kids are probably fine. And some of the kids, you know what? Some of our kids are relieved right now. Some of our kids really didn't want all that stuff. And so trying to keep it as positive as we can, acknowledging their feelings, giving them an opportunity to talk where they need to. And one thing I was going to add at the very beginning was just ask them, what would be your ideal way to celebrate? Considering our circumstances, what would bless you the most? And just having the open conversation, but not giving our kids too much of our own baggage or emotional stuff, because they don't need any more than they've already got.
It's a really good word, Monica. And I wanted to talk a little bit, now that triggered something that I wanted to say, because I actually do that. I ask my kids, what would make you feel celebrated? But I will also say I have a child who would just assume we never do anything. And that isn't the answer either, you know? And so when we have done things for him, it still marks it for him in an important way, even though he would just rather kind of slide under the radar. But, you know, so there's a balance there. And I've just had to struggle with that myself, because I do ask them, like, because I want to meet their love language. And that is probably different than mine. And communication is different than mine. So what would that look like? But then also if that fly under the radar kid really doesn't want anything, to still do something to honor them, because in the end it does matter.
It does. And it's a marker not just for your graduate, it's a marker for the whole family.
Yeah.
Good
And
point.
so for siblings that are getting ready to have that person launch into the world, that feels different. For parents, for grandparents. And so you're the orchestrator of that marker for everyone. And you don't want to overwhelm a student or underwhelm them, depending on their personality. But like I was thinking, the little thing we did for my daughter for prom, we just did a special night at home. It was as much for the rest of us as it was for her. Now we had to tailor it to meet her needs, and she went along with it. But it's something her sisters are going to always remember too. And so just remembering that, again, we have these transition markers communally, because this is a transition not just for one person, but for the family unit and the community.
It's great. Thank you both. This has been a really, really helpful discussion. And I'm so glad that we could come together and brainstorm about it. Thanks for being on today.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Have a great day. Bye.